everyone, and welcome to the second episode of AvT. Your hosts for the evening are Secular Rarity and Dean Meadows. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing good.
Well,
yeah, it'll be great.
I have to extend my gratitude to you because for those who don't know, Dean was not originally scheduled on this program. We had a last-minute cancellation, and when I mean last minute, I mean literally today. So I reached out to Dean, who is obviously a friend of YFNA, and he so graciously agreed to come on and join us. So, Dean, my heartfelt thank you, because without you, there would literally not have been a show tonight.
Well, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
It's all good.
For those who want more information about Dean's stuff is in the description. I need to get Dean to get a link tree together.
What's Linktree?
Wait, really?
No, I'm kidding. I know what Linktree.
Oh. Anyways, for those who don't know, this is a call-in show with an atheist and a theist co-hosting together. We take calls of all varieties. So whether you want to call about like pro-mask versus anti-mask, pro-life versus pro-choice, the Bible, why you believe in God, ghosts, whatever you want, you can call in and get both perspectives. And if you ask a really good question, you may get the host to bicker a little bit. But remember, this show is dependent on your calls. Without you calling in, we don't have a conversation to have. So please call the number at the bottom of the screen. It's not at the bottom of the screen. It is now 951-364-2430. And those who don't know, I am just the moderator, so I keep my mouth shut and only intervene if necessary. Last week was the first return episode with Dan Jacob and Kenneth Leonard. Highly recommended. We ended up going way over time because it was such a good conversation. Anyways, I did have a starting topic for us, but we already have a caller, so I don't think I need to use that topic. Would you guys like to get to our first caller?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like it's going to be more directed towards you, SR. It's always opposite. When I point, I do that the wrong way. This one may be directed towards you. We're going to have Joe has two arguments for God. He, him, and is a theist. Joe, you are on with Secular Rarity and Dean Meadows. What do you got for us today?
Hey guys, how you doing? Hey Dean, what's up? Secular Rarity, how you doing?
Good, man.
Doing good. Good to have you.
Hey, yeah, Dean, I'm a fan. I've watched a bunch of your stuff on before, so I was wondering when is your debate with Eric Murphy?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So I hate to announce this, but that actually got canceled because the place that we were supposed to go, their campus minister left and did not notify the church that was supposed to sponsor that even about the debate. So that's been put on hold. That's not I know. I'm disappointed as well. I really was looking forward to squaring up with Eric at Ohio State, but that is not a permanent cancellation. That's just down the road, still going to happen. I'm hopeful that it could still happen in 2022. So appreciate that.
I heard Eric's going to debate William Lane Craig. Is that true?
I have no idea about that. I would say given Dr. Craig's normal standard is to debate people with PhDs.
Yeah, that was a joke.
Oh, gotcha. I thought you were being serious. I was like, dude, that's news to me.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's never going to happen.
Cool.
But,
so what's your argument?
Okay, so I know you're a fan of the Cosmological Argument, and I just want to hear what you and Secular Rarity see what how you guys deal with the argument. Okay.
Are you referring to just for clarity, the Kalam Cosmological?
No, not the Kalam. It's just a basic cosmological. Even though William Lane Craig uses this one too. It's really simple though. You ready?
Right.
Yeah. Please lay it out for us.
Okay, the first premise is the universe exists. Second premise is the universe began to exist, or all the evidence suggests the universe began to exist. Third premise is the universe has a transcendent cause for its existence.
Okay. Just real quick, I can say at the very least, Joe, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, to be honest, because I'm no I'm no expert. But you don't get to bring something into the conclusion that's not in the premises. So there's the problem already. You mentioned in the conclusion a transcendent something. It doesn't matter. It's just wasn't in the premises. That construction right there has a problem. That being said, like I said, I'm not going to stick on that because I don't feel like it's super necessary. Began to exist.
I don't understand. What do you mean it's not in the premises? That's my third premise.
Was that your conclusion? Was that the universe had
So-
this transcendent
his-
creator, or
it's
were
the
you
universe exists.
continuing?
The universe began to
Oh, that's
exist,
it.
therefore the universe has a transcendent cause. That's what he's saying.
Right. The transcendent cause is in the conclusion. It's not in the premises. So it has to be in the construction of your argument to get to it in the conclusion. I could be totally off on that, but I'm pretty sure that's just the basic structure. But again, I don't think that's the thing we should harp on here, Joe. I
Right.
think what
We
we should
should,
talk about is the beginning of the universe and stuff, because I think that's a little bit fuzzier and more interesting.
Okay, well, you should give William Lane Craig a call because it's his argument. So
That one exactly. I'll look it up.
Right.
But
So the way that
yeah,
and I don't really have a problem. I don't have a problem with the way that he's laid this out, other than premise 3. I would say that the universe has a cause. That way you can determine whether this cause is a transcendent cause,
right.
or whether it's a naturalistic cause.
So you agree
I
with
think-
me,
I
correct,
think-
Dean?
I think he's got a good. If he replaces transcendent and just says a cause, I think he's got a decent syllogism here. So
Right. That was my
yeah.
my contention as well. So but again,
well,
I don't think that's the most important. I don't
Right,
think that's
I
the
agree.
most important thing to harp on. I think the second premise regarding the beginning of the
Yeah.
universe and stuff is more interesting.
Well,
so
Hey, Dean. So it can't be a natural cause. Nature, all of nature can't have a natural cause.
Well, I mean,
Nature can't
I'm
do
gonna agree with you on certain facets about nature, just because we're both theists. But I think it is definitely something to toss to secular rarity. It
Mhm.
would be a good question. Is, do you think the universe began to exist, has a beginning?
I think-
And if it does, and it's not some type of transcendent cause, how do you square
Dean,
that?
I can go into the arguments for the beginning of the universe.
Well, hang on, Joe. Dean just shot a question at me, and I think, like I said, like both Dean and I think we've already kind of agreed on this. There is technically a structure issue with what you laid out, but I don't think that's what really is important to hash out. And I think where Dean was taking it is a really good place, because I think probably the most consistent answer to that whole "does the universe have a beginning" thing is generally the construction around, what seems to be our local presentation. We don't seem to have the ability to understand anything outside of that whole Planck time, warping of space-time, false gravity state, real gravity state, Higgs boson, all that fun physicsy stuff
Right.
that none of us are really qualified to discuss. But so yeah, I mean, our local presentation, sure, I can grant that. I don't see that that's anything interesting, honestly, that much, because we don't know outside of that. We have no idea what that is, and I don't think it's fair to then tack anything on if we accept that we don't know. We just truly are incapable of understanding. What was the second question? It was about, if it's not a natural, is it transcendent?
Yeah. So my second question was, if you think that there is a beginning to the universe.
Yeah,
My second question was, if it's not a transcendent cause, then what do you think the best explanation would be on a naturalistic framework?
Yeah, and that's a good one. Again, I think I'm really comfortable in a lot of these questions with sticking just with I don't know.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest reasons that I do that is because practically speaking, right? We can't all be experts at everything as much
No,
as we'd
that's
sure
true.
love
That's
to,
true.
right?
Right.
And there is value in listening to the people that have spent 30, 40, 50 years and whatever it is. And that's, that's why, while I may disagree with Dr. Craig, that doesn't mean I'm going to call him an idiot. He's well studied. He's a studied individual. I don't disagree with that. But with that being said, every single time I go looking, it seems to be the case that we get to this, hey, okay, Big Bang. Hey, okay, false vacuum. Hey, okay, quarks and mesons and bosons and all that fun stuff. And then we go, yeah, but before, and they go, ah. And I think that's okay, that's where we sit.
Right.
And I understand why some people don't feel that way. So they want another answer. They want more on top of that. For me, I don't know that that's a fair move for us to make. If we grant that we don't know, we don't know.
I'll let Joe go. Go ahead, Joe.
Sorry for interrupting you guys.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, can we just? I don't think this argument will go anywhere with secular. So can I try this other argument and see what you think about it, Dean and Elliot?
Hold on one second. Well, there's still so much to unpack just right here, but if you want to move on, that's fine. But I'll try and come back to it because I want to ask SR some more questions. Go ahead.
Ready? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is my contingency argument. See what you think about it, Dean. The first premise is all contingent facts require explanation. Second premise is we can't have an infinite regression of contingent facts. The third premise is since we cannot have an infinite regression of contingent facts, there must be a first contingent fact. Fourth premise is if there is a first contingent fact, there must be a necessary fact. This necessary fact, theists will call God. You can't believe there's a necessary fact like Graham Oppie believes there's a necessary fact, but he doesn't believe that.
So what was the last premise again? Sorry.
Yeah, say that one again for us, Joe.
Number 4, if there is a first contingent fact, there must be a necessary fact.
Then the next one.
This necessary fact, theists call God.
Okay.
The necessary fact is called God.
Well, the theist would call it God.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I just did it real quick, but
no, that's cool.
Yeah.
Granted, I'm old school and I got pen and pad with me, so I'm struggling to keep up. So, I think where you would get some pushback is probably on premise 2. Ooh. And then if that last one was this necessary fact is called God, if that's actually in your argument, you get pushback there as well. But
yeah, I think you can push back on that. The second one, yeah. I think anybody,
because I think much like the Kalam, I think you would have people that would argue for an actual infinite series of events. They would simply say that we do have an infinite series of contingent things, or an infinite regress of actual events making it actual infinite, and they would say the universe is just infinitely old.
Well,
I think you can just prove that very easily.
Okay, go ahead.
With analogies.
Oh, so it doesn't. You just mention an analogy. You don't actually demonstrate anything. So, hang on, Joe. I want to ask Dean why, because he did. You picked up. I did have at least a little bit of a problem with the infinite regress thing. Dean, do you think there's a problem with time continuing on infinitely into the future, like tomorrow and the next day and the next day? Do you think there's a problem with that?
So on the surface, I would, and I think that depends on how one views time, whether, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but that depends on whether somebody is an atheist or a B-theist on time. If someone believes time is dynamic and time is how we experience it, past, present, future, then that's one thing. But if all events are equally real and they're just situated as earlier than, simultaneous with, and later than on a 4-dimensional, block manifold, then you could potentially have an actual infinite, right? So I think that's one point. But I just think from the outside, I think when you start getting into actual infinites, things that instantiate themselves in the universe, I think you just have some absurdities that start to creep in, right?
Infinite library, take a book out. How many books do you take out before the library's gone? Type stuff. Oh yeah, infinite rooms in a hotel.
Yeah,
totally.
But even, and I don't want to get too physicsy either. Real quick, hold it 1 second, Joe. I don't want to get too physicsy either. But if we're talking things like second law of thermodynamics, where it says the universe is slowly running out of energy, well, how do you have a infinite universe that slowly runs out of energy and will eventually, experience heat death? Why haven't we experienced heat death already? We've had an infinite amount of time to, for the universe to use up all of its energy, right? I guess that's the way that I would make it in layman's terms. So that presents a problem for me as far as that. So you have the philosophical side where you get these absurdities that take place, and then you get the sciencey side of it where, well, how does that fit into a thermodynamics situation with regards to the second law? So
go ahead, Joe.
Sorry. Yeah. So the problem with the infinite past, there's no problem with going infinitely into the past. You can run forever, but at no point will you ever reach forever. So every single point of the timeline, it'll be a finite. It's the difference between a potential infinite and an actual infinite. Actual infinite, I don't think can't be instantiated, but potentially something can go on forever. The problem with an infinite past is you could never arrive at today. You could not arrive at today. You couldn't arrive at any point in time if the past is infinite, because there's an infinite amount of time before any single point.
Well, not if
it needs to be.
Can Joe just stay on the call for the rest of the time?
We'll see how long we can keep him before we bore him too much. But
I'm only asking that because I like what Joe's saying, and Joe is keeping all the other atheists off my back right now.
You hear that, atheists? We need your calls too.
That's right.
951-364-2430. And theists, we'll still take your call.
So I think
let me hop in real quick. Because again, I mean, I'm no physicist, you guys. I'm not studied in this stuff, but it does seem to.
Argument.
Hey Joe, real quick, just let him answer, Joe.
Not a science argument.
Okay. Anyway, it seems to be the case that when we study things on a big scale, like planets and universes, and when we study things on a little scale, like atoms and protons, that there's a bit of a funkiness that goes on when it comes to relating those things together. And it's very difficult for us as people to think about quantum mechanical tunneling occurring, because it doesn't make sense. But 90% of your atoms are empty space. They just are. And we have just a little bit of material always going through the other, just constantly, just all the time. Why don't we just disintegrate into nothingness? Right? I think that's kind of how I feel about these types of arguments a lot of times. And I think the reason that we don't disintegrate into nothingness is because that's just not really how it works on that scale, bro. And I understand that's funky and that's difficult to comprehend, but it's not something that we have to just guess about. It's not something that we just kind of blindly point to. We've got a lot of really good things. There are like 30 countries signing agreements, y'all, putting paper and pen together, shaking hands, paying money, and building the largest frickin' Hadron Collider we've ever had in the history of humanity, as far as we understand. So, you know, to be so flippant with some of the incredible things that we have found with physics, sometimes to me gets frustrating. And especially when we take it into a really wonky philosophical, you know, thought process, Grim Reaper paradox and stuff like that. I'm not discounting the value in discussing those things, but I think there's a lot more that we're truly pushing to the side and willfully ignoring when we do stuff like that. You know, I don't need to go through a philosophical argument to just show you my car. I can just do it. I don't need to go through a prime mover argument to talk about turning the key in my car. We just do it time and time and time again. But again, I did have that as at least one sticking point. I would also probably tack on maybe one or two premises on the end just to shore up that particular argument, Joe. But in fairness, you did mention the good Oppie. He is a very interesting person. Everybody should be checking out if they don't. I can just stick where he is and just say like, yeah, sure, cool, necessary thing. Go ahead to God, because that's where we end. You know.
So I've got a question for SR to kind of
Yeah.
follow up on that. So do you think things like Grim Reaper and arguments against actual infinites are, and I don't want to misquote you. Are you suggesting that those are flippant ways of trying to navigate reality?
No, I'm not saying the those arguments in and of themselves. What I'm saying is that a lot of times what happens is we have, 10, 20 minutes of discussing various things that are demonstrable in our world.
Right.
And in the middle of that, somewhere down the line, we go, well, how do we know we're not brains in a vat? How do we know the Grim Reaper didn't shoot the first gun and then the Grim Reaper? It's like that's not, we're not doing anything at that point. We're just playing in the sandbox to play in the sandbox. And that's all great, but we were supposed to be building a castle. And I'm over here trying to build a castle, and you're over here going, but how do we know the sand's even there, man? And I'm not, I don't think you're being, I hope it's not coming off,
No,
rude,
you're
I think
and
you either, Joe. I mean, I do find these discussions fun and valuable, but if we really want to talk about God, great, bro. Tell me about God. I haven't heard God yet, except for that necessary thing is what theists would call God, which again, like, sure, great. Show me the necessary thing. But again, I could grant that. I could just grant it and move on. Where do we go from there? How do we get to God?
You could grant what?
The necessary being. Done. Fine.
Right.
What do we do next?
Well, I'll let Joe go. Is Joe still there? Is he?
I think so.
Yeah, Joe's still here.
Okay.
Did you have any?
I know where I would go, but I want to hear what Joe has to say. He's the caller.
Yeah, Joe. If you have a next step, tell us.
Well, you want me to talk now?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think I can go anywhere with Elliot. Or it's just not gonna. I mean, I'm just making a philosophical argument for God. It has nothing to do really with science at all. And it's where the premises lead. And philosophy is one of the most powerful tools you can use to figure a lot of things out. And some of the greatest thinkers ever are philosophers.
Well, hang on. Can I just push back real quick? And I'd love to hear Dean's thoughts on this too. But you said science. You said you were making a philosophical argument. Science doesn't really have anything to do with that. How do you know the soundness of your arguments if you don't have some empirical science behind them? That's like one of the main points of a philosophical argument.
This isn't based on scientific experiments or data.
No, but the two things that are necessary for an argument are soundness and validity. If you have validity, which is the structure, how do you have soundness without some type of empirical data?
So like Joe, like in your first argument where you said the universe exists,
yeah,
and the universe began to exist in premise 2, what SR is getting at is, in order to show that the universe, one, exists, or two, the universe began to exist, there's something, demonstrable that you would have to point to show and demonstrate that the universe exists. You couldn't just make that statement.
How would I demonstrate the universe exists on the phone?
I mean, there's potentially a lot of ways, but I don't think I was asking for that, Joe. I think all I said is you made the statement that the philosophical arguments you were bringing didn't have anything to do with science, and I just didn't think that. I thought that was a misleading statement, because it definitely does have to do with science, and it's not. We don't have a math equation at the end, or like a drop the ball demonstration, but just to dismiss science like that so quickly out of hand, I think kind of goes back to what I said just a moment ago, is that, I don't have a problem with these discussions, but, if really where these conversations happen are after we've already laid a lot of groundwork, it's hard for me to take them.
Let him finish, Joe. Joe, let him finish.
Yeah, I was wrapping up real quick, Joe. It's just to say, and again, you called in with these arguments. We started the conversation here, but I feel like very quickly we got to the end of them, because there's not a lot of place to go unless we want to go to another thing. And again, I'm fine with that. I'm fine. Grant the necessary. Happy to do it. I'm no Graham Oppie, but I mean, the guy's smart, and I can accept what he says. It's easy for me, but it just doesn't. We're not at God for sure.
Okay, it's kind of pointless, to go through the arguments. But first of all, I didn't say science. There's no science. That science doesn't matter. I said that this argument is not a scientific argument.
Right. And I agree with Joe to an extent that he's laying out a philosophical case, but then he's supporting that with two things. He's supporting that with logic. Like, for instance, his premise for he says you can't have an infinite number of contingent facts. That's a philosophical argument that I think needs to be investigated. I don't think that I think that's a really good philosophical argument that you're making there, Joe, that you could support and you could show and you could elaborate on. I think what SR is getting at is, I think SR would grant that this is a philosophical argument. And I think what he's just trying to say is that in some of these premises, you need more than just, the philosophical structure of the argument to show that the argument is true. Like, the universe began to exist. Well, what do we have at our disposal to say, all right, well, here's the premise of my argument, of my philosophical argument. I'm supporting that with science. Whereas in your other argument, premise 2, you're arguing essentially against an infinite regress of contingent facts, which is a philosophical argument. And so many Christian apologists, like William Lane Craig, like Ed Fazer, name them and you've got them. What they'll do is they'll use part of their argument will be philosophical, and then the other part of their argument will be empirical. And this is why I think, for me, the Kalam has been so successful since 1979, because in his second premise about the beginning of the universe, Craig argues two ways. He argues scientifically and he argues philosophically. So I really think you guys might be talking past one another when it comes to this particular point. I wouldn't just throw my hands up in the air and say that it's pointless, because I think you make some good arguments here. So I wouldn't get bogged down with SR's, point about science, because I think SR would agree there are some things that we can know that aren't necessarily demonstrable by science. I don't know. Maybe I'm putting words into SR's mouth.
I think I understand. Look, I understand. I've had this conversation. Like, I tried to tell Ethan. I went through the column with Ethan, and I went through those 5 the scientific and philosophical arguments with him, and he just said, "Well, I'm not convinced." So it's like there's nothing you can really do once you've gone through the arguments, and if they're just not convinced, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, but I think that's a good moment for anybody in that position, Joe. If you're in the position where you feel really good about your argument and you say it, and then you've said it again, and you've said it again and again and again since 1979, you've said the exact same argument, and a bunch of people are still unconvinced, I think it's fair to listen. I think it's fair to listen to the criticism and actually try to adjust it. The most William Lane Craig has adjusted the Kalam cosmological argument, I think, was recently when he spoke with Sean McDowell, when he said that the actual attributes that he's giving to God don't come from the Bible. So I think that's the most adjustment that he's done since 1979. The other premises are all the same thing. Gary Habermas has gone the exact opposite direction, I think, where ultimately he has gone from 12 minimal facts down to 5 or 6. I think there's a reason that he's doing that. And I don't think it's because the other people are being difficult. I think the information is unconvincing. I don't have to try very hard to convince you about 1 + 1, do I?
Joe, we got about 1 minute left. If there's anything else you wanted to say, and then we got to move on to the next caller.
And thank you again. I hope I hope I wasn't being a dick, Joe.
No, you're all right. You're all right. No, but there's no argument where a person can say, "I'm not convinced" if they don't want to be convinced. So it's just.
I guess so, but then you'd be saying that I'm telling you I don't want to be convinced, and I don't think that's where I'm coming from. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't say SR is blatantly saying I don't want to be convinced.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say Dean comes from that position either. We're evaluating the evidence a little bit differently. We disagree about the methodology that we both use probably, but yeah, I would say all of us here seemingly are being genuine and honest, and if we were really presented with something that was convincing, we'd change our minds. At least that's where I think I'm coming from, and I really hope we all are. So
right. And Joe, appreciate you coming in. And those are actually
great stuff.
2 syllogisms that I have never seen before in my life. So I appreciate you giving me those to look at and ruminate on, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Dean, are you at Virginia Tech?
I am at Virginia Tech.
Oh.
That's my alma mater. So
really cool deal. Well, Joe, I mean, here real quick, Joe, if you want to, I don't know if you can send something to Ethan or me. Hit me up on Facebook or Instagram. I'd love to get together with you at some point and just chat about these arguments that you've laid out.
Yeah, I live in Northern Virginia, so Fairfax. I don't know if you've ever been there.
Fairfax, cool deal. I've been to Fairfax a bunch of times. But seriously, contact me on Facebook. Let's link up at some point.
You could just give him your address right now, Dean.
I will not be giving him my address right now. I'll give you the church address. How about that? That's what I'll do.
Joe,
I don't use Facebook. You on Instagram?
I'm on Instagram, Dean Meadows.
If I had Dean Meadows' link tree, I could have all his links right now to point. But we don't have it. So
noted.
Maybe after the show we can get Dean to set that up.
There you go. I'm a millennial trapped in a boomer's body.
Real quick, Dean, how can he find you on Instagram?
My Instagram handle, it's just Dean_Meadows.
Pretty simple.
Awesome.
Okay, cool.
And that's now out there. So yeah, Dean_Meadows, and you just follow me and we'll figure it out.
Thanks, Joe.
Cool. Hey,
Thanks,
Ethan,
Joe.
I'm the guy who told you to get this started, remember?
Oh yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I remember that. I now remember that conversation. Yeah, this is so for those that I think I touched on this briefly earlier. This was a show I did a long time ago, and it was really how I wanted my channel to get started. I wanted a call-in show with an atheist and a theist hosting together. And the first episode of The Perspective, which is my Tuesday night show, there was an atheist and a theist co-hosting together. and then I just went a different direction. So this is me trying to get back to doing what I originally wanted to do with this channel, by having two people who disagree in a friendly way, and people can call in and get two unique perspectives. So
I've been sending in nobody else can see this because it's the private chat, but I've just been sending a string of cuss words to Dean. So he's been handling it really well.
Joe, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for calling in.
deal.
Thank you.
So in 2 minutes or less, did either of you have anything you needed to touch base on that call?
Only got 2 minutes.
You first, Dean.
Yeah,
I've
because
only
we
got
got more
2 minutes.
callers.
Oh, man. I think we'll just have to save that for a time where SR and I get together and chat.
Yeah,
'cause
for sure.
There's some stuff I'd like to unpack about, some of the things that he said, but it's all good.
Yeah. And I think, again, we as the people that don't believe in a God or anything supernatural like that, sometimes when people say necessary being, it freaks us out, but there is some good secular philosophy on this and discussion out there, but don't go into it biased, people. Like, go into it honestly. Really, really try. Listen to what both sides say, and if you ultimately are convinced by it, that's okay. But be willing to chat with people and talk to us about it.
Real quick, I will say this. I have to go back and watch the podcast with Sean McDowell.
Oh, it was really, really interesting.
I do know that when William Lane Craig talked to Cosmic Skeptic, he had updated the argument by removing the first premise to say whatever begins to exist has a cause, and he changed it to if the universe began to exist.
Yeah, more of a technical thing than
that would
anything
make
that actually
that would make it more general.
Yes, and it would make it a more solid argument. But him and Sean, have had some really interesting conversations. The whole mytho history of the Old Testament stuff really seemed to.
See, I'm actually going to start reading through his book here soon. Whenever I get a break from grad school, I'm gonna read through that and see how that goes.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff either way. So
yeah.
All right, gentlemen, you ready for your next caller?
Yeah.
All right. So Ameet, him. Why do churches have to use popular music or treat baked goods to entice members to attend? Ameet, you are on with Dean and SR. Can you expand on that?
Yes. So, hi Dean, hi SR.
Hey.
There's like, from my experience attending church, and I did attend church for 25 odd years. From my experience attending church, I've noticed that, and I've gone to all sorts of churches, from a Orthodox church, which is literally you go in, men and women sit in like separate pews. Women have to cover their heads. It's just like constant prayer, stand up, sit down, the whole, like, it's very ritual like. And I've also gone to the very new age churches, which are kind of like, people stand up, raise their hands, jump up, sing. I've gone to all sorts of churches across the board. I've noticed that the number of people in the older churches has been dwindling over the years. And in the newer churches, it's been growing. Or at least it seems to be significantly more, right? My question is, it seems a little bit manipulative to pull people in with music that sounds good and with food at the end of the thing and with, like community activities that are not centered around the message of the Bible. How do you think church participation would change if it was solely scripture based? And how do you think it would change, and how do you feel about that?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Dude, I am like 100%, well, almost 100% with you in what you said. I am not a fan of consumeristic Christianity. And I think what you would see if you eliminated some of the show and tell that happens in the American church, or even really the Western Western church, is that you would actually get a church that has people in it that are genuinely serious about living out their faith. And I think one of the things that hinders the American church right now is that it is too consumeristic. It is too entertainment based. And so what you get when that takes place is church now becomes about me and not about the original intent. And I think one of the things that you can see, even if you look throughout church history, I mean, for the first, I think somewhere between like the first 800 and 1,000 years, there was no instrumentation in the early church, and it blew up. It grew. It however you want to slice it and dice it, it grew because what you had were people who were not worried about what instrument was going to be played or who was going to play it. You had people that they weren't concerned about being entertained. They were concerned about getting together as a community, worshiping God, and then going that and taking that into the community. So I think that's a great point, great question, and I'm with you. I think that the consumerism needs to leave the American church if the American church is going to be effective in society.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little bit fire real quick, Ameet, and then I'm gonna pull it back and be a little bit more chill. So my fire take is, well, yeah, of course, man, they gotta hide all the bullshit, right? But I think anytime we as people are gonna be gathering regularly, right, in a community fashion, we're probably gonna do similar things, and those things are probably gonna revolve around the food and drink and the dance and the funs and so forth. Maybe not every community is a fight club. So maybe we're not all hitting each other and not telling each other about it, but we're probably going to have at least some type of we have a moment where we go, hey, everybody, thanks so much. Come on, gather round. We have like a little opening of something. I mean, you could call it an invocation, I guess. But there is something about that as just community aspect of it that I think is always going to be there, no matter what, stripe of belief or non-belief or whatever. I will also say, though, I do think you are hitting on a good point, and Dean did too. I mean, when we see the Copeland or the Osteens, and we see that stuff, and we see the Flash, and we see the the big TV screens in the background and the lower from the ceiling platform and all that, I think absolutely there's a piece of it where the individuals involved in putting that on know for a fact that the glamour and the glitz and the pretty lights are what bring people. And they're absolutely using that to their advantage. So I see it from both sides.
And I would just say as a word of caution, and I don't know if you continue to go to church or not, but if you do, I would just caution and make sure that because you've seen these things in other places, you just don't assume that the place that you're going to is doing it for not adverse, but for in a manipulative way. It's one thing for the guy on Easter to throw peeps into the crowd, from the stage, which I've seen. I walked up and left. It's another thing for someone just to say, thank you for coming. Here's a token of our appreciation. And we appreciate you being here. Or just to say, hey, listen, we've got coffee if you want it, take it or leave it. It's just there for you. So I think I would caution to say, make sure you don't apply those negative situations to new situations, right? And to be frank, I know of a multitude of congregations that are over 1,000 people that don't do the exact thing that you're talking about. In Nashville, in Arkansas, in other places as well. So I appreciate your sentiment, but I would just say, hey, just make sure that you're not applying that to every situation that you find yourself in, because you may actually be missing out on people who are genuine about what they believe and why they believe it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Dean. I don't go to church anymore. But like, I think there's two different scenarios here, and I agree with what both of you said, right? Both of you kind of made some great points. There are two different scenarios here. The one scenario is where people who believe sincerely, or like who believe for good reasons, or what they believe are good reasons, are coming together for a social activity. And the other approach is where a social activity is being used to draw in people. I think those are two very distinct scenarios. And like, I just, like, one is genuine. The other is a little bit, seems like it's being done to spread, like to kind of get more people into the church doors than it is to engage already, like people who are like believing for good reason. So
well, and just to touch on that, I mean, yeah, I do think that's a very valuable distinction, Ameet,
Sure.
to point out and for us to be cautious of, because I would probably, and again, I'm not going to speak for you, Dean, but I mean, I would probably say, I think you would disagree with that second one, where people are just putting on a concert just so that they can essentially bait and switch halfway through it and be like, nope, Jesus, what communion.
Right. No, I would completely agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I am completely disgusted by that stuff. Like it every time I see it, I throw up in my mouth a little bit.
Yeah. And I absolutely, I think, this is one of the things where, this is one of the moments where I love these conversations, where I'm speaking with somebody that we definitely disagree on a lot of stuff, but there are some other things that present some really demonstrable harm. I mean, we don't need to sit around and chat about it. We know for a fact that this shit is gross. And there are people out there that believe in God, believe in Allah, don't believe in either, believe in Shiva. There are people across the spectrum that are more than willing to stand arm in arm with us when we see that type of gross behavior and say, that's not okay. We don't want that shit here or anywhere else. Again, I do have a problem, even a little bit on the other side, the nicer, the better side, right, of those two, which I think there's still some harmful ideologies that are being expressed, even in those bests of moments. But I think it's one of those times where I say, okay, this group right here, they're hurting people now, right now. And they're doing it in a way that is so demonstrable, I just can't look away. And it's kind of a triage thing, right? Like the groups out there, the what's their names? Oh gosh, the Baptist Westboro Baptist Church. Like those, like that type. I think I'm okay if maybe we start with them, y'all, before we start talking about, the people out there that are like, oh my gosh, of course we should have separation of church and state. Like, I still believe in God, but of course we should have separate. So where do we put our number one focus is always so difficult. I mean, I totally understand that. And I don't think I'm going to do it perfectly. I don't think any of us are, but it is really valuable to take those opportunities where we do hardcore agree and just highlight the fuck out of it. Be like, look, this right here is where we can stand together and we can make meaningful change in our lifetime for people that we love and care about. And that's valuable, man.
Real quick, just to interrupt, we do still have open lines. So if you are interested in getting the atheist or theist perspective on any topic at all, politics, religion, life, call the number at the bottom of the screen, 951-364-2430. Sorry, Ameet, did you have a follow-up with that?
No, I think y'all hit it on the head.
I have a question for Ameet, if that's okay.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
So am I understanding it? Is part of the reason why you don't go to church anymore because you've seen this stuff like incessantly?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
My grandmother was a very firm believer, and she was very much like you, Dean. I respect the crap out of her. And like, she goes to church for the church, and she brings like a box of, cookies and whatnot, like she does, and she just like leaves it on the counter, doesn't like sit around and like have like a huge long chat. She's like, if somebody wants it, they'll come take it, and she walks away, right? She's not there for the social thing. I respect her. I love her. It's awesome. I stopped going to church because I unfortunately stopped believing in this. It's caused issues in my family. That because I've stopped believing. But again, that's not why I stopped believing. So,
well, I'm sorry that it's caused issues in your family. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, it happens, and they're getting better about it. So we're good.
All right. Well, Ameet, thank you for taking the time to call in.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks, man. Great question.
Can I
cut him off?
Can I shout at Dean real quick? Can I ask you a question, man?
Yeah, go for it.
So I think you and I would both probably again agree that there is definitely a decline in some places for churches, right? So older churches going, younger churches definitely coming up, but not maybe coming up as fast to replace all those numbers.
Right.
Do you think, I mean, what would you say is the best method for the church to bring in more people? I mean, I'm not wanting that, that's hardcore. But what
are
do
you
think
saying you're gonna see this? SR is looking for a reason for me to invite him to church.
I'm converting live right now, folks. You got it. You got it here.
Right. So I think, and I could go forever on this, but
sure.
I think there is essentially two reasons why the church is in decline, and is already, I mean, essentially almost non-existent in Western Europe. And I think the American church is on the way if we don't, figure it out. But anyways, so two reasons. I think number one, I think the Enlightenment, that period, following the Reformation, following the Renaissance, where you had guys like David Hume, Immanuel Kant, and others essentially start producing these arguments against the existence of God. I think that caused the Enlightenment has caused some serious issues for the church in that these arguments are being presented, and at the same time, well, not at the same time, but around that same time, you've got the Great Awakening movement that takes place. And because of the Enlightenment, the church essentially says Enlightenment plus German textual criticism, the church basically says, okay, we're going to, retract from the intellectual theater, essentially. And so what happens in the Great Awakening is, in order to spur people spiritually, preaching moves and discipleship moves from taking deep, thoughtful surveys of what the text actually means and how it applies to life. And it moves from that to these sermons that are driven and focused to have the person who's listening make an immediate decision about the gospel, right? And so that paves the way, in my opinion, for the Joel Osteens, for the Stephen Furticks, for all those guys. And so what you have in the course of history is you have this Enlightenment movement that says, these are the reasons why you shouldn't believe in God. You have German textual criticism that comes along and says, well, you really can't trust what's in the text. And then around the same time, you have the Great Awakening movement that says, well, instead of actually giving deep, thoughtful sermons about what the text means and how it applies, we're going to give these firebrand sermons like in the hands of an angry God so that you'll make an immediate decision about the gospel. And so what's happened there is that's bled over essentially for the last, I would say, at least 100 years here in America. And so what we have in the American church, and I might get skewered for this, but I don't care. What we have in the American church is we have a church that is okay with walling people into the four walls of the church, not engaging intellectually with the arguments for and against God. And so then what happens is when we're told, God exists, and then you have a student that goes off to college or later in high school, and they run into somebody that says, well, why do you believe what you believe? And they say, well, it's in the Bible. Or they say, well, I grew up like that. Or they say, well, I had some religious experience. Well, those three answers are no different than what the Muslim would give. That's no different than what the Mormon would give. That's no different than what the Jehovah's Witness would give. And so our answers to these situations and these questions look the same as everybody else's answers. And so I think, in part, if the church is going to stop declining, two things essentially need to happen. We need to insert ourselves back into the intellectual conversation with regards to things like the existence of God, the problem of evil, reliability of the New Testament, Old Testament, things like that. But then two, we need to stop faking it till we make it, right? I think we need to be genuine disciples who are interested and care about our communities and actually serve people. And this might get off into another discussion, but I really do believe that politics has hijacked the church, unfortunately.
I think that's probably another place we can agree.
And it's stopped. We've now believed that we can vote people into office who are going to do the work of the church. And if you're a believer, certainly government has a place, but the government in Scripture was never, at least in the New Testament, was never designed to do the work of the church. Those things were always separated, at least in the New Testament. So there's my spiel. That's my answer.
I think, and I think, again, I think, I'm always happy to really just circle in red as many damn times as I need to the places that we agree, which is when it comes to our government, religion just shouldn't be involved. It just shouldn't be. And when it comes to religion, our government shouldn't be involved. I don't want people making decisions for the country based on Christianity or Islam or Hinduism or polytheism. I don't want any of it, man. Let's make the best freaking choices for the citizens of our country, and let's not do so while also demonizing, everybody else that doesn't agree with that. That's just not that. Those two spheres have no business playing with each other. And it's kind of funny because I think it sounded like you were saying, to kind of bring more people back into that faith community. You're looking more at a scientific, demonstrable, type approach. And you're saying, hey, maybe we need a little bit more of that. And I think, honestly, we probably could use just a little bit more of that empathy and compassion on the non-religious side. I think we hit so hard on the science papers. We hit so hard on the philosophy. And it's worth just saying, hey man, that kind of bummed you out and that sucks. And that's okay that we talk about that, or this made you really happy and that's great. And we should talk about that. So I think there's still stuff to learn on both sides, folks. So.
Right.
So before we get to our next caller, I want to read the super chats. Caitlin Beyond, thank you. I would like to put my vote in for SR to be on the next episode of the Hot Seat, whatever that is. I think that's a great idea. If SR is down, I already have an opponent in mind.
Yeah, I'll do it. You have your people call my people. We'll do that.
Your people call
Sounds good. And then Ameet, thank you. He says, appreciate you offering your opinions, folks. And before we get to our caller, also reminder, the show goes as long as you continue to call in. So if there is a discussion you want to have with these two fine folks, give us a call, 951-364-2430. Let's get to our next caller. We've got Sven, he, him from Washington. wants to talk, or what would Dean say is good evidence for a soul, and how would he go about discussing that with SR? Sven,
Nice.
you are on with SR and Dean. What do you got for us?
Good evening, Dean and SR.
Hey, what's going on?
Doing well. So I've been around the community for a little while. Definitely talked to SR before, and I'm more of a spiritualist. I don't follow any specific theology. And so I just wanted to hear, the soul is really important to me with meaning and morality being up there. And so I just thought it'd be interesting to hear the theist, if you had evidence outside of the Bible for why humans have souls, and hear what Second would have to say back to that.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a good question. Now, admittedly, one second, let me get to the. So admittedly, I am not in any way an expert on philosophy of mind. I would say that outside of this discussion, if you're interested, I would take a look at J.P. Moreland's work on the case for the soul. And so I'll give it my best shot and we'll see where it goes. So I think one way that we could make the argument for the soul outside of the Bible would be these mental experiences that I have that seem to be the product of something other than like a brain function, right? So there's a difference between, say, the mind and the brain. So for instance, one of the things that helps me think about the soul are these first person experiences, the difference between what is public and what is private. And so this is the illustration that I give. If they were to lay me down, let's say, hope it doesn't happen, let's say there was a brain tumor that I had on my brain and they needed to operate on me. Well, they could crack my skull open and they could see the gray matter that's there, right? But they couldn't see. Let's say I happened to be dreaming at that moment because they put me under anesthesia. They couldn't see the dream that was taking place. I might be fully aware that the dream is taking place. They couldn't see the thoughts that I'm thinking. So one of those things is public, the brain, but one of those things is only there's only one person that can know about that, and that's me. And so the question becomes, well, how do we account for these first person mental experiences from a naturalistic standpoint? They seem to be more than just brain wiring. So for instance, unlike the ant, I can sit back and I can reflect on my moral choices. I can think about right and wrong. And the only other and there's nobody else that can know what I'm thinking except me. So I think one of the arguments for the soul would be these first person reflective experiences that we have. So what do you think about that, SR?
Yeah. There's a good bit there for sure. And if anybody saw me frantically Googling, it's because I was. Because I was making sure that I had remembered all the people right. One of the people that I truly love in these discussions, because she's so down to earth and she does just such a fantastic job of relaying it at such a simple level. And I'm sure everybody already knows who I'm building up, but Shannon Q is an incredibly valuable person to listen to. Agree or disagree, that's fine. But her laying out the sodium potassium ion action potential that goes on in cells and the cell membrane and all that stuff is phenomenal. And when you hear that really broken down by somebody who knows what the hell they're talking about, as opposed to just some guy with a gumball machine in the background, you say to yourself, like, oh, wow, like, whoa, seriously, we know this? And again, we're not guessing. This isn't us just like, looking at somebody's skull and just going, well, I think this is. No, we know what we're talking about when we're talking about how energy works in the neurons and how they fire. We know these things. On top of that, just because you mentioned J.P. Moreland, Dean. But Shannon Q did finally get that book and goes through it pretty hard. And she is not.
Which book is that?
J.P. Moreland's, the one you just mentioned.
Okay.
But
okay, no, I don't know if I mentioned a book. I might have. I'm not sure that I did. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But either way, there are a lot of really, really good people to look into here, Sven. Patricia Churchland was one of the people I was looking up because I knew I had seen her on R and Ra's show, but I wasn't sure.
I think she's an eliminativist when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
what was that, Dean?
An eliminativist, I believe is the name.
What
it's
is
just
that?
basically it essentially, if I'm understanding it correctly, it reduces things to brain function, essentially.
Yeah, hang on. Here's what Wikipedia says. Eliminative materialism is a materialist position in the philosophy of mind, the idea that the majority of the mental states in modern psychology do not exist, essentially. But she's just, I'm not saying she's right. I'm not saying she's the end all be all, right? But her and, people like David Eagleman, say what you will about Sam Harris, but Sam Harris is a neuroscientist. If I remember correctly, he does have a degree in that, and he does do work. And David Chalmers is a philosopher, but I think he does a lot with philosophy of mind and consciousness and so forth. There is a lot of good discussion out there. And I think for me, we kind of get back to where we were with our first call, Dean, where we have all of this stuff. It seems, when we really step back and we look at the picture, it looks like we've got all of these colors. We've got all of these shapes. And we're going, hey, red square. And we're like, red square, baby. And we're like, blue circle. We're like, blue circle, baby. And then at some point, somebody comes in and goes, yeah, but here's this funny shape and it's this funny color.
Right.
And I don't have the same things checked off that I have for that red square and that blue circle. And we both seem to agree on those two things. But this other thing is the stuff where we have the sticking point, So I don't think any of us here are disagreeing that there's a squishy mass of substance in this skull here called a brain, right? I don't think any of us are disagreeing about like metabolism or like, food consumption being broken down to energy. There's so much that we agree on. But where we disagree is this thing called the soul. And the problem with that would then be, okay, great. So we agree on all of these things. Here's where I get off the train. Get me back on. Right. Get me back on the train. If there is a soul out there, we should be able to find it. And although, absence of evidence is not evidence of evidence, there are some things. If a geologist says, all of my training indicates to me that the conditions in this area of the ground are right for sapphires, baby. There should be sapphires in this 30 square foot block right here, okay? Well, if they go digging for the sapphires and they dig pretty damn far down and they don't see anything, that actually kind of is reason to say, like, well, okay, maybe our calculations were wrong. Like maybe we were incorrect on this. Because from what we understood, if there was going to be this thing, whether it's a sapphire or whether it's a soul, there should be certain attributes and characteristics that we could point to. I don't know any of those with a soul. And it seems to me that when I hear multiple people talk about it, we have conflicting understandings, but they still seem to agree on the same conclusion. So that again, another sticking point for me. I don't think it's like, I don't know if it's like the worst thing to believe in the world if you believe there's a soul. But I could definitely make the argument the more things that we accept to be true that are not demonstrable, that do not have the same level of evidence that we have for other things, right? That can lead us to problems. The more we shake our, epistemology and how we determine stuff, the more likely we're to come to things that aren't correct, But yeah, I ranted enough there. Dean, what you got? Or Sven, what you got?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you both said. Definitely leads me to philosophy of mind. I know Patricia Churchland, she was on a really good podcast I like to listen to, a Philosophy for Our Times.
Oh, I'll check that out.
So, yeah, I just think with consciousness and every theory of consciousness or soul is like panpsychism or any theology. It's going to be something that you can't measure or find because it is separate, like the brain versus the mind. Like it is where the brain is, but what we see in the physical world is the brain. There would be no way to measure or see the soul of consciousness because it is with you.
So, do you think there are things that exist that you can't physically demonstrate?
Are you asking me or Sven?
Sven.
I would say yes. I do also enjoy math, and so Platonism. I think there are, ideal triangles, even though in the real world, whenever we're trying to look at something, you can't.
So
you go down to the microscopic level, you can't find a perfect triangle in the real world.
Right. So my point would be, it wouldn't necessarily follow that because I can't physically demonstrate that something exists, therefore it does not exist.
What do you mean by demonstrate? Maybe we're having
with empirical data.
So, because I don't think that's what the word demonstrate means, but
right.
There is empiricism as a potential part of it.
Right.
But I don't think that's what.
So I couldn't empirically demonstrate that the number one exists. The number one is an abstract object, right? But I would say that it's part of my reality. It's a way in which I can understand how the world works because it's part of this thing called mathematics, right?
Could I posit a definition for demonstrate, and we see if we're on the same page, Dean?
Sure.
So here are just the two that come up on Google. Which this isn't a I'm saying just because the dictionary says this is how it is. That's not. I'm just saying this is what they seem to say as a common usage. So we've got two. One, give a practical exhibition and explanation of, and two, clearly show the existence or truth of something by giving proof or evidence. I don't see anything empirical there necessarily, right?
Right. Evidence could be philosophical or
could be. Yeah. But so, I mean, we would need to demonstrate a soul to accept it as true, right? It doesn't have to be empirical, but there needs to be a demonstration.
Right. You could make the philosophical case for the soul. And if it's a sound argument, then you're good. I'm simply trying to say to Sven, it seems like what Sven's saying, and you can correct me. It seems like you're saying, well, because I can't see a soul or empirically demonstrate that a soul exists, therefore it doesn't exist. And I'm simply saying that you do agree that there are things that exist that you couldn't empirically demonstrate exist, and you accept those things as true. And I'm just saying, I just want to caution and say, or ask the question, well, how do you know that that isn't the same case for the soul? That even though you can't physically, empirically show that it exists, that it wouldn't be something that you couldn't demonstrate exists through, say, like a philosophical case for the existence of the soul.
Right. Well, there was some misunderstanding. I am on your side of this. I don't follow a theology, but I love that you brought up the number one. I've talked to Secular Rarity about, the law of identity is something that you have to. I think it was just last week, Secular, we talked about the law.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm much more on your side. I'm a firm believer in the soul or consciousness or whatever it is, something that's outside of the brain.
So I guess here's a question for both of you, because this just kind of popped into my head. Would you say that concepts are physical, or would you say they're non-physical? And if that's not a true dichotomy, please tell me. But what would you guys say concepts are? Are they physical or non-physical? Just your understanding. It's not a gotcha. I'm just interested.
I don't think concepts are I don't think they have a physical counterpart, if that's what you're getting at.
Because like
I think it would
Patricia,
be a non. I think it's a non. I think if I had to just on the spot say, I think it would be a potentially a non-physical entity. I guess. Are you saying if you're asking me as a concept, something that's like concrete that can be instantiated in the world, I would say no, it's not.
well, I think we're mixing things up there. I'm just asking about physical and non-physical. We can do a definition for physical if we need to.
Yeah, I don't think a concept is a physical thing.
Okay. Sven, where would
I
you?
would also say it's non-physical. Like I said, I brought up, Platonism is very convincing, and so there is no triangle in our world. We just know of the concept triangle, and then things that appear to be triangles we label as triangles. So yeah, I'd say concepts are non-physical things, abstract ideas we bring up about the world.
Is there anything else that falls in that category that you can think of? Is there anything else you could point me to that's non-physical?
Abstract
That
objects.
I think abstract objects and concepts are the same.
They're part of the same category.
I mean, we could say category. We could just say they're completely synonymous. I don't think it matters for this conversation, but is there anything else other than like thinky thoughts that are non-physical? Because that's what it sounds like we're coming to, which kind of sounds like special pleading to me.
I'm not following. Why would it be special pleading?
Because nothing else resides in that category except for this one
non-physical thing. I think God would be something that would be non-physical. That's not an abstract.
God's a concept. You're saying God's not a concept? You're saying there's no conception of God?
Sure, there would be conceptions of God, but there could be concepts of things that are not instantiated in the real world and things that are instantiated in the real world.
Oh, we're definitely. I don't know if we have enough time to completely go down that route tonight, but I think you and I are definitely going to have to keep going on that. I mean, well, because I have some other thoughts on it too, but I guess
so. Like,
yeah.
So, like before the wheel was, before the wheel was invented, there was first the concept of the wheel, right?
In a person's mind?
In somebody's mind, yeah.
So then it's physical. Because it comes from their mind?
Well,
right? I mean, Patricia Churchland.
Unless you're equivocating, this is going to get fun.
Yeah.
Unless you're equivocating that the mind is the same as the brain.
Not necessarily. I'm just simply saying that there clearly is a physical correlate. So like Patricia Churchland absolutely can demonstrate to us how neurons physically change with memories and so forth. So like there clearly is a physical correlate. We just may not have the exact connection between the two, right? No, am I misunderstanding that?
A physical correlate between
the thoughts we have in the brain and the things that our brain is? Like the neurons and stuff, the pathways. So when I learn how to ride a bike, certain things in my brain do this.
Yeah, there's a pathway that's created.
Yeah, literally, it just goes boop. A pathway that wasn't there, right? So that's a physical correlation. So even though we can't, and I wouldn't say that pathway is like the knowledge of a particular translation of a sentence to a different language or anything. I don't know if that's going to be right at all, but it does seem to be the case that pretty clearly there's a physical component to the thoughts that we have, right?
No, I wouldn't discount the physical thoughts that we have. I would say given substance dualism, I don't want to. I'm just guarding against the equivocation that the mind and the brain are the same thing.
So how do you and Sven, please, by the way, if Dean and I just keep yapping and you want to jump in, just jump in.
Let's let Sven jump in.
Yeah. Please.
No, I've talked a lot of the show before. I'm enjoying this. I think Spencer knows where I stand, and I wanted to hear more the theist perspective. If I hear something interesting, I'll definitely pop in. You guys keep going.
Cool. Well, what would you say are the differences between the brain and the mind, Dean? And again, I'm no neuroscientist,
so I think and I'm no neuroscientist either, but I would say I think the brain is a physical construct of a multitude of things. But I think there are these things that are separate from brain function, like intentionality, right? So the brain itself doesn't intend to do anything. So as long as we have things like mental states, subjective mental experiences, for instance, let me try and so for instance, I have a pain sensation that I'm currently aware of right now. So consciousness, I think that has to do with it. I think consciousness would show that there's a difference between brain states and mental states. I'm fully aware of how I feel given the sharpness of pain and what I experience.
Sure.
Even though there is a dependence, I would agree, there is a dependence upon the brain firing the pain receptors in the response to this pain. It still follows that my subjective experience is not the same state as the neurons firing in the physical pain.
I think I see what you're saying. That's interesting. That's interesting. So it kind of sounds like to me what you're saying is, and please tell me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds to me like you're saying that if I take a picture of something, like if I go and I take a picture that really, is every aspect of my house, it's still never going to be my house, right? Like it's a perfect picture, but it's never going to actually be the house that I'm taking a picture of. Is that, or am I off base?
Right. So I think what you're meaning to say is that the picture is different from the house, right? The firing of the camera is different than the actual picture being developed.
Do you think that's a good firing of the camera versus the picture developed? So okay. So you're saying more along the lines of the act of taking the picture and the printed out final copy
and the development of the photo.
Interesting.
I think that may be a good analogy. I don't know. That's the first time that I've tried it.
I know. We're just playing with it. Yeah.
But that would be my point. There is a difference between the neurons that fire the pain receptors and my subjective experience of pain. And so that leads me to believe that there's a difference between the brain and the mental state of being in pain. Right. So
I think
that's all I got right now.
Yeah. I think I see kind of where you're coming from. I guess for me, the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, of course, the map and the territory are different. One is the mountain, one is a description of the mountain.
Right. And so I think for the advocate of the advocate who would say that, well, and I don't know if you believe this or not, that we are just brain states, then the groundwork or the work that they have to do is they have to explain, okay, well, if we are just brain functions, then what accounts for things like consciousness, first person self-awareness, intentionality. And you can't just say in a general way, well, brain chemistry. You have to demonstrate or provide some empirical data that would suggest, well, how did this consciousness, this intentionality arrive by an evolutionary process?
Would you say that, and I forget the gene, and I know some geneticists and probably some
you're talking genetics,
be mad at me. Yeah, I should remember this, but it's okay. But we recently found a gene in like macaques or something, macaws. I don't know how to say the monkey, but it's not even a monkey. I think it's a primate. But again, I know people are going to yell at me. But we found this gene that when it turns on, it like triples the amount of neurons in a brain. Would you say stuff like that and like the ability to do object permanent tests on like 6-month-old babies and like dogs of different varieties and so forth, or like the dot on the forehead type thing? Do you think that's any?
To be frank, I've got no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's complicated. It's really, it gets really dense.
But if those tests or experiments somehow account for the existence of consciousness.
Well, I don't know if they do wholly, right? I don't think they do completely. Otherwise, none of us would be, right? But I do think there's definitely some good stuff out there that indicates the more connected the neural pathways are, the more that they seem to be able to accomplish ultimately.
We need a medical professional right now.
Yeah, and a brainy person and
Yes.
a primate person. I don't know what these scientists are called.
Well, either you can get JP Moreland, Eric Hernandez, who does a lot of
Oh,
stuff on
Eric
the soul from
Hernandez.
Texas
Yeah.
Apologetics, or a buddy of mine who's getting ready to graduate from Biola. His name is Jason Hyde. He lives, eats, sleeps, and breathes, philosophy of mind, which all power to him, man.
Yeah,
I'll
seriously.
I'll just sit over here and talk about the Kalam.
Yeah. It gets dense quick.
Right,
Well,
right.
so okay, so let me see if we can get back to some points of agreements. I think you and I would both say there's a brain, right? We feel stuff, brain states, right? We're both on the train together right there. It seems to me you're the one making the next thing. I'm just going back to this is what we know thus far, and I'm not sure after that.
Right.
Would you say that I need to posit something more, or you do?
So I would say that I don't know what else I would posit if I'm a substance dualist, right? I believe that I'm a composite of both the physical and, I guess you could say, the spiritual, the spirit aspect, the soul aspect of it. And so I think where I would say to try and get secular rarity to hop back on the train when it comes to souls, would be this, what is the best explanation that we have for the existence of these mental states, right? And is there really a difference between the brain and the mind? And if there is a difference between the brain and the mind, if the mind is one thing and the brain is another thing, and we're not just brain states, then it would seem that there is this extra component that makes us who we are as humans. Now, that doesn't get you to Christianity, right?
Oh, sure.
But I would say, I would say that's where I would start not being a philosopher of mind.
Yeah.
Right.
So what would you say is that? I mean, my understanding of dualism is. Oh,
real
no, go
quick.
ahead, Ethan. I'm sorry.
Once Sven, does that help answer your question at all?
Yeah, I was agreeing a lot with Dean. The one thing I would add to evidence for the soul would be existentialism, the very experience of wondering why. I feel like biology and neuroscience doesn't explain that as much. It doesn't seem useful or productive from just a biology standpoint.
You don't think
unique to humans.
Can I just make sure I'm understanding, Sven? You're saying you don't think living creatures, there's any purpose for them asking why? Is that what you're saying, or am I misunderstanding?
Correct. Yes. It seems nature just reacts.
Wouldn't it be super valuable for a slug to know? Wouldn't it be super valuable for a slug to like choose like not salt over salt?
But once you throw in existentialism, you can't like prove certain things. You start to wonder why about concepts. And so it's, the fact that we have created these non-physical concepts just seems totally against the way a brain should work in a natural world, to just accomplish things and do things.
I'll look into that some more, Sven. I'll definitely look into that some more.
All right. Sven, thank you so much.
You guys.
Thanks so much for calling in.
This has been really, really fun so far.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for the most fun part?
All right, what you got, man?
I'm going to make an assumption right now, and I need to know if my assumption is correct. This is based on, I have a little knowledge, but I believe pro-choice, pro-life.
That's where I come out.
Correct.
Okay. So, who wants to go first and explain why they are what they are?
Why they are?
Right, starting with here, we'll go with you, Dean. Since we've had two theist callers,
right.
We'll start with you. Why are you pro-life?
Because it's in the Bible. No, I'm kidding. No, I think
All right, shut it down, Ethan.
shut it down. It's over. No, well, I certainly am impacted by my worldview. I think that if humans are created in, as they say, the imago Dei, if we are created in the image of God, then we do have a objective value to our lives. And I think that, given that, I think that there are a multitude of reasons why innocent life shouldn't be taken, namely because you would be killing an image bearer of God. But also, I think that there's a good, it's going to sound weird, I think there's a good secular reason. I think there's good secular reasons for not allowing abortions to take place. And I think the issue comes, we're asking the question, is the unborn fetus and or child, however you want to categorize that, is that a person? And if that's a person, then I think it would be wrong to take an innocent person's life. And therefore, that's why I hold, to a pro-life position, because I think the unborn are humans that have particular rights. So there you go.
I definitely got some questions, but I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to say my thoughts.
No, please.
Well, I will after. I'll lay out my stance a little bit too, because I felt like Dean did a good job, which is just that there's a good bit of stuff there I think I could probably agree with. I could probably even, as shocking as this may be to the other atheists or non-religious folks, I think I could probably take a stance of why human life is objectively valuable. But with that being said, there's a huge argument for autonomy. I do think the personhood argument is valuable. I find it interesting that somehow in this one instance for personhood, we are granting particularly odd rights for other persons that we would never grant, ever. Like, we have court cases about this in medical history. We don't do it. And so it's strange to me why this one particular case would be that. I'm also happy though to take this side, which again I'll take any flack from anybody that wants to say otherwise. My understanding is generally pregnancy somewhere around that 40-week mark. I saw student Dr. Ben in the chat. I'm sure he will tell me when I'm wrong, but I think there is a good discussion to be had about why it's probably not okay to, at that point in the life of a fetus. I also think, well, let me just plug student Dr. Ben again. He has a great freaking couple of episodes on his channel where he talks about pregnancy. I was misinformed about what terminating a pregnancy means medically. And I think when you get informed on that, it is very hard to be on a pro-life side. Once you actually understand what's going on in doctors' offices, it's very hard to come to any other conclusion but the very clearly established medical conclusion that we have. So, which is somewhere around like the 22-ish, I think, weeks is where our Supreme Court ruled last time. But do you want to go first? I'm sure you have something to say, Dean. I'll let you go since I rambled.
No, you're more than welcome to volley questions at me. I actually haven't had a discussion about this particular issue in quite some time, so
yeah, me either.
I'm interested to hear what questions you might have or what comments you might make.
Well, I think the first one, because again, and I hope this has been evident, not only for you, Dean, but for everybody here that watches, just because Dean and I come to different sides, I mean, it's very hard to get more opposed than that, right, y'all? But I still think there's value in us highlighting the places that we do agree. So I want to ask, are you in favor of criminalizing abortions? Do you think we should pass a law in the country to make it illegal?
Ooh. Or well, by criminalizing it,
make it illegal.
I am for making it illegal. I would make it. I would make abortion illegal.
Is there a cutoff date for you?
Like
Like before this time it's fine, or after this time it's not, or anything like that? I'm just trying to figure out.
I don't
like,
know.
is the
I've never
morning after pill allowed.
Yeah, good question.
do what? Oh, I
Like,
don't.
is
I don't
the
necessarily.
morning
I don't
after
have
pill.
a. I wouldn't have a problem. That's an interesting question. I don't know that I've ever faced that question as far as, morning after pill, things like that. So I don't know as far as contraceptives go. I think, pragmatically, I would think that may be a middle ground that both pro-life and pro-choice people can make. But I don't know that I'm in favor of terminating life. And I wouldn't know which Christians would, if there's a case to be made for the use of contraceptives not being abortion. I'm open to hear it. I just have never come across it. So I think that's a great question, one I haven't thought about. And so because I haven't really thought about it, I don't know that I'm prepared to give like a solid answer, on that particular question.
Do you think
But I wouldn't, one thing I wouldn't do is I wouldn't, I think given the nature of the circumstances in which many young women find themselves in an abortion office, I wouldn't send the, I wouldn't penalize the lady for going to the doctor. I would probably penalize the doctor.
Okay. It's interesting.
Because I think there are times where people, regardless of the situation, even regardless of whether they believe it's right and wrong, I think people do get in a situation where they are so desperate that they do commit wrong acts with the aiding and the abetting of other people who know that what they're going to do is wrong.
Okay.
So I wouldn't penalize the woman.
Yeah, and I think that's I mean there is a lot there, I think. But one of the questions that comes to my mind for sure on this, regarding criminalizing and so forth. And just real quick, just a trigger warning for anybody else out there. It's about to get as upsetting as we can real quick. So, but
Viewer discretion advised.
absolutely.
Hide the kids, hide the children.
That's right. Rape and incest. You think it's okay to have an abortion when a 6-year-old girl is fucked by her dad until she gets pregnant?
Right. So,
because I think that's a really, really important, that topic right there, unfortunately, as upsetting as it is, that is the crux of this, right?
Well,
if it's okay there, then it should be okay everywhere else. And if it's not okay there, then it shouldn't be okay everywhere else.
Right. So first, I think it's clear to lay out that those are horrible situations. I don't think anybody wishes that on anyone.
No.
But also I want to stay within the bounds of facts. And I think that those types of situations make up maybe 1% of all abortion cases that take place. Might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less. But that doesn't negate the fact that they take place, right? I don't want to. So I would say this, that one horrible act doesn't provide room for another horrible act to take place. And I think the reason why I say that, I say it this way, is that if you can establish that that the unborn are actually persons that have particular rights, then I don't see how, because them coming into existence was the product of a horrible act, results in someone having the right to take their life. So certainly a guy that rapes his daughter, or someone who
Terrible.
is committing incest, those people need to be strung up on a tree, and that dad needs to have his private parts seared off with a branding iron in public. You know,
Well,
I agree
I
with.
don't know. I don't know
I'm
that I
for
would
that.
totally agree. Corrective
I would
action and
be
so forth.
I would
but-
be down for that. That's my
Well-
opinion about
well,
that.
let me
So
ask real quick.
that's where I would roll with that.
Yeah, let me because there was another and I apologize for being so forceful with it. I saw
Dude, it's okay.
Ethan's face after
No,
that. I
it's
saw it
okay.
kinda
Dude,
tell. But
Quick point. I was in the Marine Corps for 6 years, so I
Yeah.
heard it all.
Yeah.
So I've
Which-
heard it all. I've been called it all. Don't worry about it.
And again, just another point of agreement I love to highlight. Thank you for your service. We have atheists, we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have lots of people that serve in our military in this country, and I love that. I appreciate that. You mentioned that if we can establish that the unborn are persons,
Right.
Why does that negate the rights of the person we know is established? We don't need to establish that the 40-year-old woman is a person, do we?
No, I don't think that we do.
So
No,
would
and I'm
proving that the unborn is a person negate their rights?
Well, they would still have would proving the unborn as a person negate their rights? Well,
Because that's what it sounds
for
like
instance,
to me.
if I establish that I'm a person and I establish that you're a person, is it okay for me to kill you if you in whatever instance rely on me to survive?
If I rely on you to survive?
So for instance, if and
No,
this
I think I understand the question. I'm just
Yeah.
making sure that that's what you're asking. If
So
I
I'm putting
rely
in
on
the
you to
context-
survive?
So I'm putting on the context. The unborn obviously are, and I'll just be super general, housed right in the uterus of a female. So the female is a person, agreed. And when I say if we can establish that, I'm simply speaking because some people don't think that the unborn are persons. So I'm saying
Sure.
if you can show that these are persons, then you have a person that is housed inside of another person, right? So that person who's housed inside of a person is reliant on the female to survive. So I'm simply saying, if we extrapolate that out and I establish that you're a person and I'm a person, and in some way you rely on me to survive, would it be okay for me to kill you?
This sounds like it's the violinist argument by Judith Jarvis Thompson. Am I wrong?
A
defense of abortion was a moral philosophy essay written by Judith Jarvis Thompson,
right.
first published in Philosophy and Public Affairs in 1971.
Yeah.
The answer there is no, you don't have the right. No. The violinist does not have the right to use that person's body. Done. It's over.
Right.
So we can establish that they are persons. They still don't have the right to violate the other person.
Right. So you're saying you're saying that I couldn't kill you then?
No. I'm saying if there are two persons,
right,
and one of them is being forced to use their body to keep the other alive, that's the violinist argument. We've already got a great answer for this back in the 70s. And the answer is you don't have to keep the violinist alive. It would be immoral to force the person to keep the other person alive. Even if we grant that the fetus is a person, which I think there is a problem with viability and so forth, which again, when watching student Dr. Ben and understanding more about what actually goes on in a medical capacity, when we're terminating a pregnancy at 6 weeks, we're not thinking about is it a person, is it not a person? But even if we grant it's a person, we run up to the exact same problem that's already been solved over and over again. You don't get the right to violate my autonomy just because you also have autonomy.
But there is a difference between the violinist argument and the abortion situation here, right? So in the violinist,
other than the fact that nobody's actually hooking people up to violinists,
well, other than that, abortion is not just, in the violinist argument, it's about life support. Abortion is not just withholding life support. It's the active, it is the termination of an unborn human. Second, the mother's child isn't a stranger, right? It's not like, and I think we could go here outside of rape and incest. Is that in a multitude of these situations where we have these situations where people want to get an abortion, the issue seems to be, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, it seems to be that this particular pregnancy is inconvenient.
I disagree, but I could see why pregnancy. Actually, personally, I would say that all pregnancy is probably inconvenient. But I don't
Right.
think it has anything to do with convenience or not. I think it has to do with autonomy and the rights of an individual.
And so office. So with that, like the child isn't a stranger. The violinist is where they don't belong.
We can make the violinist your best friend. I don't think the argument changes.
So there's a different structure with the violinist and the abortion situation, whereas it's not as if I don't see how the child that is within, or not the child, excuse me, the unborn, because I don't want to special plead for the pro-life choice or the pro-life situation. But there is a difference between the violinist and the situation with the mother and the unborn. And I don't see, based upon I just don't see how, because there was a particular decision that was made by a person, well, at least two people, right, to engage in sexual activity that results in a pregnancy, that automatically gives the right for the mother to terminate the unborn if the unborn is a person.
Well, she's not again, and I'm not medically trained, but it's not that she's terminating the unborn. She's terminating the pregnancy, right?
Well, what is the pregnancy?
A different thing, right? It's a matter of her body being forced to undergo changes that she doesn't consent to. That's what it is. And I think no, hang on.
Okay,
because I think this might make it clear, right? So Ethan reached out to me one point in time in the past, and he said, "Hey man, love to have you on this show, you and Atheist, chatting it up." I was like, "Man, that'd be awesome." We had somebody, unfortunately they fell through. Ethan reached out to you, Dean, and you were so awesome to take up the mantle and jump in. And then like 20, maybe 30 minutes, I agree with that. 20, maybe 30 minutes into this discussion, you and I were having such a freaking good time that we asked Ethan if we could hang out a little longer, right? Is all of that true?
Yeah.
Can I leave right now? Do I have that right?
Sure.
I should be able to terminate a pregnancy. Done. Because I can agree to something today. I can agree to something today and still change my mind tomorrow. You may say that Rarity boy, I don't want to chat with him again because he just leaves halfway through the discussion. Right. You could say that and that's fine, but you don't get to be able to take that right from me. If I want to just disconnect my camera and walk away, I get that right. And I should absolutely get that right if me not doing that results in essentially what would be, for the three of us, a bowling ball shoved deep inside our colon. I find that, against my will, really, really problematic, And I think if we aren't just hitting it head on like that, I'm so concerned about all of the repercussions. By us criminalizing the doctors that give abortions, we don't stop abortions. We cause people to die for things that are truly medically. I mean, we could absolutely. Our birth rates aren't perfect. Okay. Unfortunately, in the United States, we have more women dying in childbirth than pretty much any other Western country out there. Like, not Canada, not UK, not Italy. It's us. But this would be like us saying, I got syphilis, and instead of just going to a doctor to do the thing, we just let it kill us. We just allow people to die in the streets because they're not going to stop terminating unwanted pregnancies. That's not going to happen. And if we do value people, which I think you do, I really do. I think both of us do. It's just that I'm not sure why in this one instance we would allow the autonomy of one person to violate the autonomy of the other person in such a degree. And that's me giving you the whole ball game. That's me saying, I'll grant all the personhood stuff. And I still don't see how we get past that hurdle.
Right. So I think on this point, you made the reference, well, we agreed to stay longer and then you left and that would, stop. But don't you think that that's being a tad bit flippant in...
Do I have the right to my person, Dean?
No, I'm saying that you have the right to your person, but you leaving the show doesn't mean that Ethan or I are going to die, right?
No, it doesn't.
Right.
That's why we have the violinist.
And my point is not,
which is the same thing.
My point is not that the question at hand really comes down to what I guess my point would be, well, what about the autonomy of the unborn if they are persons? So you're saying the unborn who are in the womb of the mother, by them being in the womb, and you correct me if I'm wrong, by them being in the womb, by saying, hey, you've got to continue this, we're violating the autonomy of the mother. But in the exact reverse way, by allowing the mother to have an abortion, if these are persons, their autonomy is violated by somebody else. So if somebody is a person within the womb, and
you have to be conscious to have autonomy.
Do what?
Do you have to be conscious to have autonomy?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
So that's interesting. We might have to go further down that.
Well, if you don't have autonomy, you don't have autonomy when you're not conscious, could I bludgeon you in the head with an axe while you're dreaming?
I'm conscious while I'm dreaming.
You don't know what's going on around you.
I absolutely.
What if you were
that's
sedated?
The whole point of, that's the whole point of the three
sedated?
Stages. There. Hang on.
What if you were sedated in a hospital or in a coma?
But I had consciousness. So we're talking about we're saying no. You said you said you were conscious. Hang on, I'll explain.
You had consciousness.
No, I'll explain. So in the scenario where a fully grown person, you and I aren't arguing about whether a 40-year-old man or woman is a person. Okay, right. That person, if they're a person, means that they have consciousness. So if they lose that consciousness at some point, that doesn't necessarily mean that they lose all the things that come with consciousness. But if it never has consciousness to begin with.
So now you're making a level of development argument for abortion.
I think that's what our laws are saying regarding viability. That's what the Supreme Court decided based on the medical evidence back in the fucking 70s, right?
Well, just because the Supreme Court makes a decision back in the 70s doesn't.
No, but they made it based on the medical evidence that was available back in the 70s, and that was 40 years ago. But we've done way more. But we've also seen
instances in which the more now the medical science essentially says, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, I'm more than willing to be open to it. Essentially says that. And maybe this is a distinction that we need to tease out, that life does begin at conception. That process of
I don't know a doctor who says that, but
is absolutely it's in a I'll
life begins at conception. Those are medical things like from Harvard and Johns Hopkins.
I'll go ahead and link them to you when we're done. But my only point is this: is that level of development doesn't negate somebody. Personhood. A 7-foot tall NBA player is just as much of a person as somebody who has a severe disability. And I don't
You're
understand.
changing the subject because I completely
no.
agree. I'm talking about the
No.
consciousness. What's the
No,
consciousness in
because
either of those scenarios?
Because consciousness is part of the level of development, right?
Sure.
Okay. So,
So you're saying in the scenario of the individual that the individual with disabilities, you're saying the impairment is something mental,
no,
where consciousness is a problem. Because if not, then it doesn't matter for what you and I are talking about. We're talking about consciousness.
no.
And if you're
I'm making
saying
an overall argument that you can't justify abortion on the basis of level of development of the unborn, whether they have consciousness or don't have consciousness, because there are people.
Wait. I think you would totally disagree with that. If
No,
a pregnancy is on average about 40 weeks, you would say there's a problem with the 39 week mark, wouldn't you? Like ending
Sure.
the life of the fetus, not just
Sure.
terminating the pregnancy, but ending the life of the fetus.
I guess
which it
I'll
would
have to get
definitely
more
be a
medical
fetus.
information about
Yeah.
what it means to
Because
terminate a
I would
pregnancy.
say that there's a problem at the 39 week mark. If we just, for willy-nilly, no reason whatsoever, mother's health is not at risk, baby's health is not at risk, 39 weeks terminating a pregnancy and then ending the life of the fetus, I do think that's a problem.
Well,
and I think there's a viability argument to be made there.
Okay.
But I don't see why that wouldn't then also apply at 1 week.
Okay, so you are for saving the life at viability.
So viability is at least one of the most basic things to be taken into account here, but the viability of the fetus does not trump the autonomy of the individual that is pregnant. That is still the overarching thing. Even if it is 39 weeks, we can't in a moral sense say that thing still has the right to use this woman's body. But I added on the killing of the fetus thing because of the simple fact that at 39 weeks, it seems to be the case that there is viability. And if there's not viability at 6 weeks, if there's not viability at 4 weeks, then what happens is we terminate the pregnancy. The idea of killing a person isn't a part of it medically. It just has nothing to do with it.
Okay, so let me understand this. You're saying, it seems like you said at first, at 39 weeks, to kill a fetus willy-nilly is a bad thing.
I think so.
So
I think so. I think that because of the medical understanding that we have, killing a fetus at 39 weeks is problematic. That doesn't have anything to do with terminating the pregnancy, though.
Okay.
Hold up at 4 weeks, it's only about terminating the pregnancy. It has nothing to do with killing a fetus.
I think this plays right into my level of development argument, because you're saying you think, and I don't know that you would say that.
Yeah, I'm not a medical expert. Please correct us.
Do you think it should be a law that at 39 weeks you can't kill a fetus?
No. And here's why. Because there are problems in pregnancy at 39 weeks. We cannot blanket criminalize it.
Okay, so here's my point. So it seems like you're saying you personally, SR, are saying, hey, me personally, 39 weeks, everything okay, mother's life not at risk. Killing a fetus at 39 weeks, not a good idea because of viability. And so then I'm asking, okay, so is viability the standard by which we should, all things being equal, mother's life isn't at risk? Is viability the standard of not terminating a pregnancy?
No, but it's part of the criteria that has to be adhered to. If the thing isn't viable, then nothing else. I mean, we don't need to keep talking at that point. If it's not viable at 4 weeks, it's not viable. And if that's the case, there's no discussion to be had more on that. Because when we terminate the pregnancy, you're not killing anything. You're stopping a particular physical act. And that's why I said right at the beginning,
but you don't have a problem with somebody.
I did not. Oh, no, go ahead.
But you don't have a problem with somebody terminating a pregnancy at 4 weeks. And you also wouldn't say that but you do say for you personally, there's a problem with killing something at 39 weeks.
Because you're mixing the two concepts together, Dean. There's a termination of a pregnancy and a killing of a fetus.
No,
at 39 weeks, it's definitely a fetus medically.
But isn't
at 4 weeks, it isn't for sure.
but what I'm asking you to, what I'm trying to see if you're willing to say is that you personally think that for a mother at 39 weeks, everything okay to kill a fetus for you is wrong.
I think anybody at that point just killing a fetus for no reason, there's problems to that. But that
Okay.
doesn't have anything to do with pregnancy, and it doesn't have anything to do
Sure
with
it does.
autonomy.
They're still
So,
pregnant
real
at 39 weeks.
We are over time.
Oh, okay. You know what?
Uh-huh.
I mean, is that good for you, Ethan? Do you want to end it right there hot? Or do you want to keep going, Dean?
Well, I'm just trying to understand. I just want to ask one last question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
If it is okay, and maybe I maybe I need to understand what you mean by terminate a pregnancy. It seems
Yeah,
like
I
that's
think
just-
there's a lot of medical information here that all of us as lay people need to go understand.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to understand is why is it just terminology, or is it just stopping a particular process? Because if we're saying that terminating a pregnancy is just stopping a particular process from taking place, well, then that's just a fancy way of just saying we're ending a life here, because the same thing would apply at 39 weeks. That would apply.
It doesn't, though. It just
at
doesn't.
4 weeks.
And I see what the problem is, Dean. And the problem is really similar to the problem that I had. Because again, the medical knowledge that we had in the 70s was more than enough. And we've done a lot since then. And it's very specific and it's very nuanced. And
So
without understanding that on the most basic of levels, it's very, very hard. This is why we have lawmakers who answer the same way as you, Dean. You don't know if plan B is termination of a pregnancy. You admitted to that. And our lawmakers and our lawmakers don't either. But guess who does know?
Right, but I'm asking you, what is the
OBGYNs.
difference? But I'm asking you,
OBGYNs know.
What's the difference between terminating a pregnancy at 4 weeks and that
viable.
So you're saying that viability is the point at which okay.
No, but it's an important point that you're not grasping.
No,
it is an important point that you're not getting. If the thing isn't alive, then the concept of us killing it doesn't come into play, man. Because it was never at that point yet. And with that being said, even if it's at that point, again, we're going backwards. We're going backwards because I already gave you this ground. I'll grant it to you at the beginning. Right. It doesn't change anything. The one person's right do not violate the other person's rights. That's not how it works, man. Even Kant. Now, I think there's problems with this, but even our boy Emmanuel, I mean, he was talking about how autonomy can't even violate self-autonomy. So you don't get the right to violate my autonomy or anybody else's. Whether you're 6 weeks, whether you're 12 weeks, whether you're 7 foot, doesn't matter.
Or whether you're 39 weeks.
You don't get the right to violate my autonomy. Yes. And that's been consistent the whole time. If the woman wants to terminate the pregnancy at 39 weeks, yes, I think that's okay. But the problem is that you're getting hung up and you're equating the death of either what is a clump of cells or something that is a fetus that is almost at the point at which the average pregnancy lasts. Well, you're equating these two things.
But I'm trying to get you to tell me, from a medical situation.
No, you're going to have to listen to what the OBGYNs actually say, who've been doing this since the 70s.
Okay. Well, so then I'm asking you a question about terminating a pregnancy.
Okay.
So that I can get your point of the difference between terminating a pregnancy and killing a fetus at 39 weeks. And your answer is simply, well, I'm not going to give you the answer. Go look at it yourself.
Well, I have given you the answer a bunch of times. The problem is that you're just not familiar enough with what the medicine is. And neither am I. But that's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm asking you.
There are OBGYNs who do know this, and they knew this back in the 70s, man.
So you're not going to tell me. Okay, so just one more time for me.
Sure.
What does it mean? What is the process, or what does it mean to terminate a pregnancy, and how is that different from killing something at 39 weeks? Is it just viability?
Okay, no. because you're
Okay.
talking about two different things. You're
Okay.
talking about killing and you're talking about a process, which is pregnancy. These are two totally separate. And this is what I think is the biggest problem when it comes to the individuals on the pro-life side oftentimes, is they're equating things that they're not the same, man. And the problem is that muddies the water. That muddies the water for this when the water's not muddy. It hasn't been muddy. Like I hate to harp on this, but we did know this stuff back in the 70s. This was
Right.
before I was born. So,
Yeah, me too. I'm
yeah.
not that old.
Yeah. So I mean, we've known this information for a really, really long time. And it's not as if that information has radically changed in any way that would shake the foundations of this.
So,
And again, the whole discussion about viability, honestly, is just a fun thing for me personally to talk about, but it has no bearing on the conversation,
Right.
because autonomy doesn't get to violate autonomy.
all right. So I get what you're saying, that there's the terminating, the difference between terminating and killing a fetus is, one is killing a fetus. The other one is the process of pregnancy, right? You said one is stopping a process of pregnancy.
Well, you're equating.
No, I'm just making sure I have you clearly. You're saying that there's the difference here is one is the stopping of the process of pregnancy, and the other one is killing a fetus at 39 weeks.
That would be the difference between termination of a pregnancy and killing of a fetus.
Okay.
Yeah, they're two separate
So
things.
when does the process of a pregnancy normally end?
Well, again, on average, my understanding would be 40 weeks.
Okay. So if you kill the fetus at 39 weeks, you're still stopping the process of pregnancy.
See, that's why I know you're confused, is because you're still seeming to equate killing a fetus and termination of pregnancy, and I don't know why. We've talked about this.
Well, I mean,
Killing the fetus at 39 weeks, bad.
but
Killing
that's
the
still-
fetus doesn't come into it at 2 weeks. That's not a thing. It's not on the table.
No, what I'm
But
trying
again,
to
even
lay out.
if it was on the table at 2 weeks, the one autonomy cannot override the other autonomy. And so again, the viability is something that you're getting hung up on for no reason.
Right.
Because ultimately, this is something that is established. We do understand when, about which these little things that was like a little wiggly sperm and a little like circular looking egg thing, they kind of come together
Right.
and they multiply and they suddenly get, fingers and eyes and hearts and all that crap. But like we're really knowledgeable on this stuff, and that explanation by me did a huge disservice to the hundreds of years of medical information that we have. But I think you're also doing a disservice to that by not going. If you want to say that abortion should be criminalized, and I appreciate that you're not criminalizing the woman, but I kind of feel like the outcomes are just as bad in my opinion. But it seems to me that if somebody would want to criminalize abortion, then you ought to know a hell of a lot more about what the Plan B pill is. You ought to know a hell of a lot more about at what point, what goes on in a pregnancy. You should know these terminologies a lot better.
Right. No, I've got 3 kids. I know what goes on in a pregnancy.
Yeah. But you don't know the difference between ending a pregnancy and killing a fetus.
I'm using your definition in your terms, and you're saying that one is the stopping of a process of pregnancy. And I asked you, well, when does that stop? And you said at about 40 weeks, which is
The
usually
average.
birth. And then I said, okay, so stopping a pregnancy at 39 weeks
Yes.
through abortion is the same thing. And so
No, it isn't.
that's
It
what
doesn't.
that's
It
what
doesn't.
that's
No,
what I'm hung
because
up on.
if the fetus is viable, at 39 weeks, and we end the pregnancy,
Yeah.
where does killing the fetus come into it?
Because killing the fetus stops
At 39 weeks?
because
At 39 weeks?
What?
Terminating a pregnancy at 39 weeks kills the viable baby.
if you were to kill a 39-week fetus, why?
Okay, you're
how could
confused
she still
again.
be
No,
pregnant?
Dean, this is a
No.
simple question. At 39 weeks, ending a pregnancy kills the viable fetus, yes or no?
Ending a pregnancy? Are you? Well, there's another
This
way
is
to
the
end a
confusion.
pregnancy.
This is the confusion.
No, there's
This
another
is
way
the
to end a
problem. This
pregnancy.
is
You
the
could induce
break,
labor at
Dean.
39 weeks.
This is the break, Dean, is that the information that you and I have is not at all current with what the actual individuals who do this on a daily basis know and can demonstrate to us day in and day out.
If
You and I are layman idiots on this topic.
But if
and
you
because
kill a
of
baby
that,
at
we're
39
confused.
weeks,
But
if
see,
you
that's
kill an
why I know
unborn,
you're confused, is because that my question was at 39 weeks, ending a pregnancy at 39 weeks
but
with
there's
a viable fetus.
but there's
does
multiple
that kill the
ways.
baby?
There's multiple ways to stop a pregnancy.
Yes. All I'm
Right.
saying is the
Right.
most general, Dean. This is
Right.
simple.
And we're talking about
Does
abortion. If you're saying
does it necessarily mean at 39 weeks with a viable fetus, when you terminate the pregnancy, does it necessarily mean
okay, you didn't say
kill
that
the fetus?
necessarily, no, because
Okay,
you can,
so
because
there
you
you
can,
go. That's what I was
because you can
asking. You
induce
just wanted to
something
be
else.
pedantic about it for 30 minutes, man. If you turn around, if you end the pregnancy and then do something to this 39-week-old fetus that is viable outside of the womb, you're doing something different. You're killing the fetus. You're not ending the pregnancy anymore. So you just agreed to what I said, that it's not the same. And so this is one of the things that's I'm sorry. I'm getting a little ranty.
So walk me through this here. So
I'm not sure we can.
I know,
honestly.
but
I think it was a really great discussion, Dean. And I
how would you
like I
end?
said, no, hang on, Dean, because I don't think we're gonna get anywhere.
No,
I don't think we're gonna
genuinely
get
wanna
any
And we're like
further.
way over time.
Yeah,
I know,
I don't
way
think we're
over time.
going to, because the disconnect between you and I is you and I are so much closer in our understanding. The problem is that we are so far behind everything in medicine. And there's no question. These questions that you and I are bouncing back and forth off each other, this just isn't something for an obstetrician or a gynecologist, man. Just sit down.
I do want to ask Caitlin Beyond, because she was the one that was up. She said ending a pregnancy doesn't mean killing a fetus.
Right.
So what I'm trying to understand is, if you kill a baby at 39 weeks, right? That fetus.
That's a separate process from ending the pregnancy, Dean.
Okay. So what? So then I might.
You can have a C-section. You
Right,
said you
or
got
they could-
kids, bro.
Or they could induce labor.
Absolutely.
Okay,
So how does that kill the
my
fetus?
point? No. Okay. So my point is only that by killing the baby through abortion, then help me if I'm wrong here. If you kill a baby at 39 weeks outside of a C-section or induced labor, then killing that baby means that she's no longer pregnant because the child's dead, right?
I think that's a perfect place to end it, because it really highlights the confusion I think you and I have been bouncing around.
But, well, could you just answer the question for me? I really want to know.
I don't know how else to answer it, man. I have answered this 6 times, and I will watch this back and see, and I will go ask student Dr. Ben and the other people that know about this. But I think the confusion is that you're not a doctor, and I'm not a doctor.
No.
But the doctors have more than enough information on this, and the confusion that we seem to have is not there in the operating room.
Right.
It isn't there on the medical
I may be
wings.
missing out on
It just isn't there.
nuance here, but it doesn't seem to me. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to me that outside of, I guess, is what you're saying, that having a C-section, inducing labor, obviously those are ending. Those are
Yes, and they don't necessarily end the life of the fetus.
Right, and I agree with you there.
Okay. So then we talked for 30 minutes at the end to get back to the same point that I was trying to make that you didn't agree with.
So then what you're saying, because I really do genuinely want
No,
to know
I honestly think you and I need to hash this out in another time, and I think we need to bring on some medical people. I think that's the easiest thing to do.
Can I just ask one more question?
I mean, you can, but
so C-section doesn't end the pregnancy.
That's correct. No, C-section ends the pregnancy. As far as I understand.
Inducing ends the pregnancy.
As far as I understand.
And so
doesn't necessarily kill the fetus.
Right. It doesn't necessarily kill the fetus, but aborting a baby.
That's how I know you're confused. That's how I know you're confused.
I'm just asking for an answer.
Are you saying aborting and ending a pregnancy are different things?
No, that's what I'm asking. Would aborting a child at 39 weeks, would that end the pregnancy?
Okay, so that's how I know there's a confusion. Abortion and ending pregnancy,
I'm
my
genuinely
understanding.
trying to understand.
I know, Dean, and
you're
I've said
just
it 5
saying,
times, but listen, if you really
can
want
I
to
just
understand,
get a yes or no? Because I want to know. I really
abortion
do. Okay.
and ending a pregnancy.
You're saying those are different things.
No, you
They're
are.
the-
You're
No,
saying they're different things.
Okay, but you're saying that they're not.
I'm saying, as far as I understand, termination of pregnancy and abortion, synonymous. That's my understanding.
Okay. Well, I'm with you on that abortion and terminating a pregnancy are synonymous.
Okay, but that does not equate to anything whatsoever related to death of fetus or none of that. It doesn't have anything to do with that. That's what I'm saying. And for some reason, it seems like there's a sticking point where you don't seem to understand that the two are separate acts. The ending of a pregnancy, which we can also call abortion, is not the same thing as ending the life of that thing. Fetus, viable baby, clump of cells, blastoid, whatever the fuck it is. Those are two separate things.
Okay.
Okay. Dean.
All right. Well, hey, send me links. I'll look at it.
Yeah. And I hope it wasn't too hot, Dean. I had a really, really good time, man.
No,
This
it wasn't.
great.
I had a great time talking about it. I'm always open to
Yeah.
to learning other stuff. I guess I just need to go ahead and
I do too. I have lots to learn, like on a lot of stuff, believe me. But
all right. Well, real quick, Dean, where can everyone check you out at?
Well, thedailyapologist.com, our YouTube channel called The Daily Apologist, and also Instagram, The Daily Apologist, Twitter, The Daily Apologist, everything social media, The Daily Apologist. There you go.
Thank you. And Secular Rarity.
I actually am lucky enough to be back on Student Dr. Ben's channel this Friday. I want to say at 6 p.m. Central. He is going to be telling me why I should not be drinking urine. So you guys would be surprised
Dean,
how much this comes up in my life.
Yeah, Dean, you know the story behind that, right?
I don't want to know the story.
No, we'll tell you off camera.
No, real quick. There are some far right wingers that say the new cure for COVID is drinking your own urine.
People don't drink your urine.
Yep. And again,
personal opinion. Just go get vaccinated.
Yeah. And again, another fantastic point of agreement.
Get vaccinated.
Get your damn vaccinations, people.
Yes.
Easy,
as Lewis Black said on the Jimmy Fallon show, if I could fill my tub with vaccines, I'd bathe in it.
That's really great hearing that come from you, Dean. It's appreciated. Anyways, their links are in the description. Everyone, the perspective will be on tomorrow night, and I am totally blanking on who's on. I'm sorry, I'm a bit scatterbrained. It's going to be
SDB and Richard Gilliver,
and SGB will be in the house.
Student document.
If the people watching have know any theist not atheist, but theist podcasters, please send them my way. I have plenty of atheists who can host this show. I don't have many theists. I'm looking for more that would be interested in joining and maybe doing it every now and then. I'd also like to thank the top tier patrons of the channel, which of course I accidentally closed. Cindy Plaza, Left, Right, Left, Ryan Hammond, Kenneth Leonard, Skye, Secular Rarity, Philip Leitch, Richard Gilliver, _Atheism, Ameet, Mathew, and Ray Sylvester. Thank you so much for your patronage. These shows do cost money to help to run. So if you're interested in becoming a patron, consider it for just as low as $1 a month. Link is in the description. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Dean, Secular Rarity, thank you so much.
Enjoyed it.
Specifically, thanks for doing this last minute.
No problem.
Don't disconnect yet. Good night, everyone.